WGBH TV Boston presents Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett, and guess what I'm doing? Even though we've had a snow, the ground is not frozen. And I've been preparing a place here to put in some spinach seeds the very first crack of spring. Now, I've dug some cow manure into the soil and also some lime. Very, very important to put lime on your soil in the fall so they can meld with the soil and really get in to sweeten the soil for spring planting. You always put more on in the spring, but try to get some on in the fall if you possibly can. Well, I'd like to have you see what we've been harvesting today. Now, here it is, the latter part of November. We have a pretty nice crop of things coming out of the garden. Here, for example, is some Chinese cabbage. Oh, the snow is still on it. Some celery, and these beautiful leeks that have been growing here along with because of our compost. Then we have some parsnips, some Brussels sprouts, some tomatoes that we picked green, been ripening them in a cooler along with an apple. That gives them a little ethylene gas. There are those Jerusalem artichokes. One plant that we dug last week had 10 pounds of roots on it from a little tiny spot at the beginning. Here's that early purple head cauliflower. So delicate flavor. Turns green when it's cooked. Here are the winter turnips, more lettuce, more celery. Then up here, higher up, you begin to see the kale, the collards. This will be the last picking of our peas, but we have peas even at this time of year. Carrots, broccoli, lettuce of several different kinds. There's a winter radish, some more different kinds of winter radishes and regular summer type radishes. Well, now today, I'm going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about African violets, how to make a geranium tree. We're going to plant some indoor bulbs, and then in our plant clinic, I'm going to look at a Swedish ivy that's really in bad shape. Well, let's head into the greenhouse. I notice that the pansies are still in blossom. This cold weather doesn't bother them a bit. Now, the first thing I want to talk about in a progress report is this plant right up here. And this is a type of a fig tree called Ficus nitida. You see it has formed little figs. These are not edible, but they are an indication that that plant is very healthy. And we brought that plant in 3 weeks ago to contrast it with this poor little thing, which we brought in at the same time, that was absolutely on its last legs. It seemed to have it was dead on its feet. We repotted it into a smaller pot and have given it a little tender loving care ever since. And here you see new green leaves started. You know, it's still touch and go. This plant is I would say it's in intensive care, and we'll try to bring it through. It looks as if it's going to make it. Then let's take a peek at our cucumbers. You see the cucumbers way up here on the vine, already beginning to grow. Remember what I said about cucumber fertilization. If you don't have honeybees in your house, then you're going to have to do the job yourself. Pick the male flower and just touch it on the female flower. Remember, the female one is the one that has a little pickle on it, and you'll begin to get cucumbers forming. And we're talking about fertilizing blossoms to get fruit. Let's look at this tomato plant growing here indoors. There's your regular tomato blossom. There are two ways of fertilizing these blossoms. One, the simple way, is simply to snap against the stem like that, and the pollen drops down onto the blossom, and it is fertilized, and it will set fruit. Now, the other way to do is to use one of these hormones. Now, this is the one called Blossom Set. This is what I use in the spring when the temperatures are too cold for good pollination. And simply spray some Blossom Set on that blossom, and it will form fruit. Now, while we're looking at progress, look what's happened to this amaryllis. Great bud coming up here on a stem like a baseball bat. This flower bud itself is beginning to crack open. We'll get 4 flowers from that. Each will be 6 to 8 inches across. And then while we're talking about that flower bud, let's look right down to the base of the stem. And see, here are the leaves, and then here is a second flower bud coming along, another promise of more flowers. We get 2 flower stalks, 7 to 8 flowers from it, without any question at all. Well, let me get my coat off here, and I want to talk to you about some of those indoor bulbs, the kinds that don't have to be set outdoors as you would a tulip. The one I want to talk about today is called Fuchsia. Now, Fuchsia has what I think certainly one of the most delightful fragrances in the world. It smells a little bit like a mixture of nutmeg and cinnamon. A bulbous plant grown from what is called a corm, just in the same sense that a gladiolus grows from a corm. It's a South African plant, comes not only in yellow, but in shades of cream and white, through shades of pink to dark red, also in lavender shades. Excellent plant. You can grow them in your house if you have a cool room, say a cool sun porch with a temperature somewhere around 50 degrees at night and a lot of sunshine. Now, the Fuchsias grow from these inconspicuous little things called the corms. They have a little brown tunic, it's called, that covers the bulbs as a protection. Now here I've simply used a pot of ordinary Jiffy mix, leveled it off about 1.5 inches below the top of the pot, and we'll set these little bulbs or corms in, just press them in the soil about 1.5 inches apart. Very simple, so you couldn't imagine an easier operation for planting. Roughly 1.5 inches apart. We'll eventually then cover these over. I'll get one more bulb in there. One more about there. Now, simply use a little potting soil. We'll cover the tops with roughly 1 inch of soil. Leave roughly 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch here at the top for water. Give them a drink of water. Those will be out of the ground in about a week, be in blossom in about 2 months from now. Well, I want to talk to you now, as I said, about African violets. All you ever wanted to know about African violets. And I brought in a few plants to show you what they should look like. This is, without any question, the most popular flowering plant in America. And you have to really think it couldn't have become popular if someone didn't have success with it. Well, the success with African violet depends on knowing the answer to what it really needs. First of all, let's say the African violet is not a violet. It is an entirely different genus. It's a close relative of the Gloxinia. It comes from Africa, from what is now Tanzania. When this plant was discovered in 1893, that country was known as German East Africa. And it was a German named Baron Walter von St. Paul who discovered this plant growing in that part of Africa. A warm climate, 70, 75 degrees night and day. And he found them growing under trees. Now, this is one of the big keys to their culture. They like partial shade. And let me tell you, and of course they like this shirt sleeve, comfort weather, 70, 75 degrees. If you have those two factors in mind, you're well on the road to growing African violets. But let's talk about what makes a good plant. Well, the first thing that I like to see on an African violet is good green foliage growing horizontally rather than up tall, than straight up vertically. What I'm saying is, if the leaves are growing horizontally, it's an indication that the plant had the correct amount of light to do its best. The next thing I look for is this. I want all of the leaves, if possible, to come from a central crown, just one crown, and this a single rosette of foliage. For some reason or other, plants grown in a single crown blossom more freely under average circumstances than when there are multiple crowns. Now, in buying a plant, I like to look not just at the present blossoms, but at the buds coming here. You can see 3 flower clusters coming down from the center of this plant. I'd say this is a great plant to buy because it has great promise ahead of it. So let's summarize some of the culture. We need some shade. That is, I grow mine on a north-facing windowsill so they get bright reflected light, and they blossom 12 months of the year. Now, if you grow them on a west window sill or on a southern exposure, have a light lacy curtain between the sun and the plants, because you can get bright light without the sun. We call it filtered light. An east window is also a great place. I should say that from the middle of November to the latter part of February, African violets can stand the full strength of the winter sun without hurting them. It actually helps them to blossom. But remember, bright reflected light. Temperatures 70, 75 degrees. If the temperature goes down to 60, they stop growing completely. At 55 degrees, they seem to shrivel right up. They simply can't stand cold temperatures. Now, the next thing is water. And the water should always be warm, tepid, even hot. So you're not going to hurt your plants. You're going to help them with this warm water. And what I do in my own house is to put the water in a saucer beneath the plant like that. Again, using nice warm water. Just slip that right in there and get it in the saucer. Now, how do we know how much water to give the plant? The secret is this. Put enough water in so until it will be, everything can be absorbed. Leave it there for an hour and a half. After that time, no more water will be absorbed. Lift your plant out of the saucer and just get rid of that excess water. We don't want the roots to sit in wet soil. The soil should be barely moist, neither wet nor dry. Now, you notice that I watered only from the bottom. There is one exception. When I fertilize the plants, I water from the top because I'd like the fertilizer to go down through the soil, through the entire root ball. Now, I personally like to use a liquid fertilizer because it's completely soluble and goes through the entire root ball right away the minute it is applied. Then the great thing about it is don't overfeed your African violets. If you read what it says on the label, cut that amount in half and give it to them about every 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They don't need a lot of water, fertilizer, but they'd like a little as they go along. Now again, if I put fertilizer in water like this, then what I do in that instance is to reach right down without getting it on the foliage and apply the water right down in here. Now if the surface of the soil turns white, as it sometimes does from over-fertilizing, then water from the top several days in a row and see if you can't flush out some of that excess fertilizer. All right. Now I want to get to some African violets that have some problems, because we looked at some nice ones, but I put out a call here in the studio and saying, if you have some sick African violets, bring them in, because I'm going to start talking about some sick ones. Well, I've got some beauties. Look at this poor little fellow here. This plant's leaves are going up rather than sideways. Its leaves are small. The leaves are small at the end of long stems like this. A classic example of not enough light. When this plant is given enough light, it will blossom, and it will not blossom until it gets light. That's its big problem. Well, let's look at another one here. Look at this leaf. Oh, it looks as though there's some sort of an insect. And getting into that, looks maybe a leaf miner or something. All those white blotches all over the foliage. This is not an insect, and it's not a disease. It's caused by water colder than room temperature being applied to the foliage. And that's a very important key to success. You can use warm water, but it must be warmer than room temperature is the secret. Hot water is really great, very warm water. This has had cold water. The leaves are malformed because of it. I hate to talk about something like that, but this is one of the keys to keeping the foliage good, warm water. All right, now let's look at another plant. Well, I had this plant brought in yesterday, and I noticed that some of the leaves were puffy. It just was so engorged with moisture. I said, wow, this plant is getting too much water. So I tipped it over like this. Well, I found 50 cents on the bottom, but I did not find a drainage hole. There again, You must have drainage in any kind of a house plant, and this one doesn't have it. Well, this plant is in real trouble. It's got to go into a pot where it will have drainage. Well, while we're doing, before I knock it out of the pot, I want to give you another little tip. How do you remove the leaves from an African violet? Well, you don't cut them. Simply reach your finger right in to the base of the stem, like that, and push down on it and snap it off, and it will snap off right at the main stem. Now, I wouldn't want to leave a little stub, because that stub will just turn to mush and will finally decay. Well, you can go around a plant like this, take off those old leaves, and then it will be ready for repotting. And we'll then have to go into a container. Oh, I see, I'm taking off all of these leaves that are damaged, because this plant has to be ornamental if you can possibly make it that way. Get rid of all of these things. And then we'll repot this into a container that has a drainage hole. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about now in African violets, but you can bet your life on this one thing. We're going to come back to African violets again and again and again on one of the shows very soon. We'll talk about propagation of African violets. But right now, I want to talk to you about something else that has taken me weeks to get to, but this is a geranium tree. And this is what we have right here. Now, this is not a tree geranium, but it's an ordinary geranium trained in a tree form. This little shoot growing from the bottom, already 8 or 9 inches long, was only a ½ inch long when I decided that we should talk about this way of growing geraniums. But we'll get to that again in a minute. Here's a geranium I'm allowed to grow up with a single stem all the way up to the top, all of the side stems taken off, but the tip not pinched out until it got at the desired height, roughly 2 feet above the pot. And then I pinched out the tip of that stem, causing buds to develop at the axils of the leaves. That is, where the leaf joins the stem, buds came out, making new stems. I counted here a few minutes ago, and we now have 8 little stems. I'm going to keep pinching those out all went along and develop a crown of stems at the top. I expect by next spring we'll have 25 to 40 stems coming here. And the secret on geraniums is this. You can only get 1 cluster of flowers at any one time from 1 stem. So get all the stems you possibly can, and then you'll have a great bunch of flowers. So here we have a plant. This flower is incidental. The stem isn't long enough to pinch. But now here is a stem which is long enough to pinch right up here. And all I'm going to do is to take the very tip out of it. Just like that. Take that little tip out. Now we'll get 2 or 3 stems originating from that point. Well, now, this is the little fellow I've been saving down here. This fellow that came out all by itself. Ordinarily, I would have taken that off, but it started to grow rather strongly. I'm going to cut that fellow right out. It's a little bit woody. I think it already has, yeah, it does. It already has a root on it. So, this can go right into a flower pot right away, and we'll train this fellow right up straight. Don't pinch the top until it gets about 2 feet tall, or taller if that's what we wanted. We'll make another tree-type geranium from this one. Very, very easy to do. But while we're talking about tree-type plants, let me show you another cute little thing. And this is a fuchsia. This is a fuchsia which is ordinarily grown as a hanging plant. Now, I have allowed this one to grow up with a single stem and have not pinched the tip. Matter of fact, I haven't pinched these side branches because I wanted to do this on the ear. But now I want to show you that I'm going to take these side branches off. Just get rid of all the sides. I allow the leaves to stay on it because the leaves are what's generating the strength within the plant. We'll take all of these sides off, clear to the top, all the way up, even up to here. Now, this one's going to have a little blossom on it that's incidental. I want the top to grow up about another 6 inches. Then I'll pinch the top. And let me show you what happens then. Then you get a plant shaped like this. And so we'll end up with an umbrella-shaped tree, a fuchsia tree with a little stake to hold it, and there'll be cascading blossoms all summer long. Wouldn't that look nice on a shady patio? This is a place to put a plant like that during the summer months, and you really enjoy it. Well, I want to get over to my plant clinic today, and on my plant clinic, I have a Swedish ivy that's seen better days. Now, this plant, let me show you what a good one looks like. Up here over the top of my head, I have this one, a handsome plant. You see how shiny the leaves are, how they trail over like this. It's even blossoming. This quite blossoms with little lavender spots. Beautiful plant, does very, very well in the house, and is easy to grow. Well, let's look back at this one again. This plant, short, stubby growth, a reddish color to the leaves and the veins, and the growth is stubby, not long and luxuriant. Well, first of all, let's say we could make maybe 50 plants from this. If you want to give your friends something for Christmas or New Year's, why, start with a Swedish ivy like this. Every one of these will make a little plant. Simply put them in water or soil. But what I'm going to do now is to cut this fellow back, because I can see down at the base here an opportunity of having a very nice plant rather quickly. So we get rid of all of these things. You see all the cuttings. Every one of those will make at least one cutting. So we can have all sorts of Swedish ivies from this one. Now this plant, I can tell you right now, has exhausted every bit of nourishment in the soil. We'll tap that out and take a look at what's happening down underneath. Now, some of the drainage rocks are in it. But look here at the solid roots. Again, the knife comes in handy because I can simply cut right down through that ball. Now we can get another plant from that, but this has the makings of a very, very nice Swedish ivy, and it will come along very quickly because it has all of this growth. You see all of these roots just waiting to get their tentacles down into the soil. Again, we use a little Jiffy mix, set this fellow down a little bit deeper than what it grew previously, so as to get some soil on those roots which were growing up above the surface of the soil. Handsome little plant now, and a week from now, that will have grown maybe a ½ inch. A month from now, there will be maybe 4 or 5 inches long. It will eventually cascade right down over the side of the pot and make a beautiful, great plant. So you know you haven't lost anything on your Swedish ivy. You can't kill them, but you can multiply them just like rabbits. Well, now let's get to a few questions today. Questions on gardening, either indoor or outdoor. Would you send them to Crockett's Victory Garden, WGBH, Boston, 02134. My first question today comes from Ruth Griffin in Boston, who said, "Dear Jim, how long should one continue putting a poinsettia to bed in a dark place? Mine is getting new growth and has turned red. What do I do now?" Well, let's start in by saying that everything you've done up till now has been right. It goes in the dark, into a dark closet at sunset, comes out at sunrise. The short day causes these flower buds to initiate. Now your plant has initiated the flowers. Set it on a sunny windowsill, keep that soil barely moist, and it will blossom for months, right straight through from now until maybe February or March or even longer. Now here's a letter from Worcester, who said, "Dear Mr. Crockett, follow your instructions about poinsettias and put them in the darkness at sunset, but now the leaves are turning yellow and falling off. What's wrong?" Well, I don't know where that plant was. It may have been outdoors or put into a pot and has automatically dropped some of its lower leaves. But I would say also that you may not have been giving it enough water. Bright sunshine and a barely moist soil are the keys. Otherwise, the leaves will turn yellow. This from a friend in Providence says, "Dear Jim, when and how do you prune rhododendrons? Is it too late?" Yes, it is. Mine is out of control. It covers the front window. Wait until you have enjoyed your rhododendron blossoms next spring. Then prune your plant, and I'll be talking about pruning rhododendrons at that time. I would never sacrifice a rhododendron bud that's already been formed. Now, Lester Ruth in Milldale, Connecticut. Dear Mr. Crockett, instead of having to repot plants into larger pots, why isn't the seedling started in a pot large enough to accommodate the full-grown plant? Well, you know, you have hit upon one of the key things on growing plants, and that is there must be a balance between the pot and the plant. Now, here we have a young geranium plant growing in a pot with sufficient soil that the plant can absorb whatever moisture we give it. Now, were we to shift this little plant into a pot this size, it would be lost in a great sea of wet soil held in by the sides of the pot. You would then generate the wet soil condition, which is the cause of 99% of the death of houseplants, too much water. So the idea is to have a balance. If you're going to shift a plant such as this, shift it to a pot just the next size bigger, and then the next size bigger. That's the key to it. Well, let's see what else we have. Leo the plant, Derry, New Hampshire, wants to know, I'd like to know if I could graft a branch on a young apple tree. It's about 4 years old, has not blossomed yet. When and how can I do this? Well, I have an apple tree in my yard with 6 different kinds of apples on it. I'll show you exactly how to graft an apple tree in March, which is the correct time of the year to do it. That's a fun thing to do in gardening. Now, here's 11-year-old Terry Paul, New London, Connecticut, writes, I planted marigolds at school in September, and they haven't come up yet. I think they are dead, and I want your advice on it. Well, you can be sure that they're dead, because they should have been up in about 4 days. Plant some more seeds from that same package. If they don't come out, throw your seeds away and get another package of seeds. That is the easiest plant to grow if it's given the right conditions and the seeds are alive. Well, now for my tip for today. Our tip for today is one of the greatest secrets in gardening, and that only goes right back to observation. Now, you cannot observe a plant, especially a house plant, from a distance of 5 feet. Get it right up where you can see that plant. Now, I want you to look at this one for a minute. Here we have a cineraria, dark green foliage, very happy. But I check on my plants, and yesterday I looked underneath the leaves, and I want to show you what I found. A great colony of aphids already started, which would soon suck the lifeblood out of this thing. My comment, my tip for the day is observe your plants, treat them just like babies, and that is the way to keep ahead of diseases before they happen. That will give you the green thumb. One more tip from Crockett's Victory Garden. I hope you enjoy the program every week.